Hey folks, it's Kary Oberbrunner, and I have with me an amazing guest, Eric Diaz. How you doing today, Eric?
How you doing, Carrie? Thank you for bringing me on. I'm excited. I'm excited.
I'll tell you what, man. Let's give a few minutes of introductions here because I love starting things, and I've been thinking about starting this podcast now for I want to say 8 months. The
Okay.
very first time I heard about the topic, I said, "Oh my gosh, the people that follow what I do, the Igniting Souls tribe, and even friends and family, I said they got to hear about this. So unless people have been under a rock, Eric, they
Yeah.
probably heard about blockchain. They've heard that word. They've heard about crypto. They've heard about NFTs. And finally, I can dive into this topic because I feel like the time is now. And Eric, tell us first of all, give us 30 seconds of background on your history in this area.
Of course. Yeah. So I started my journey, I'd say around 2016, and I didn't dive fully into it. I just started dabbling a little bit, finding out what Bitcoin was, what all these other cryptocurrencies were, and that's where I started my journey. I started learning about it, and as the years went on, I just became more enticed to learn and to learn and to learn even further, up until the point where I learned to develop, smart contracts, which, as we'll talk about later, is a very key foundational point in cryptocurrencies, and how everything works and facilitates within that. And I'm passionate about finance specifically, and I think cryptocurrency, you know, has a big role to play going forward in finance. Personally, at the moment, I'm working within the financial services field, within a bank, and I'm looking forward to push these sort of, new financial roles that cryptocurrency might play. I'm looking to push that forward, into more of the traditional space. So that's
Yeah.
where I'm at right now, and I'm definitely excited to share my passion with you and your viewers.
Yes. Well, and I'll tell a few seconds about my history because I'll be honest, when I first heard crypto, I thought, oh, that's a certain type of person. That's kind of a fringe person, or that's kind of someone who's really focused on money but what I realized, Eric, there's a common friend that you and I know who connected us together, and Tyler Wagner. And Tyler and I are connected in the publishing space. And so people might think, the viewers, like, what the heck is a publisher talking about blockchain and NFTs and crypto? What the heck? But as I dove in, I'm like, every industry is going to be affected by this. And if they don't think so, they're joking. In fact, the church I go to, Eric, once I started to get into this, I told my pastor about it. I said, "Hey man, have you ever thought about collecting offering with crypto?" Just in, kind of in passing. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, I go to the website and now he's accepting crypto. And
Yeah,
s
yeah.
and so right? So everybody has to be either A, aware of this, or B, they're going to hide for the next 6 to 12 to 24 months, and then they're going to wake up and the world's going to be different. So tell
Mhm.
us, Eric, give us a deep dive on just why in the world are we even talking about this? Like, what happened in our world that we're even talking about this?
Okay, well, to kind of talk about what you're saying is, it will affect almost every space, and I like to think about it as the internet. Back in the 90s, when the internet started to become popular, there were some people involved with the internet, and there were some people that were not. And if you look now where we are today, ending 2021, we're fully engaged. Everybody's on the internet. If you're not on the internet, I mean, I guess there's some people not on the internet, but everybody's pretty much on the internet. And this is the same place where this is going. I'm sure many of you have heard this. We'll call it a buzzword now, Web 3.0.
Yes.
This is like the third level now of the internet. Web 1.0 was very standard static pages, maybe a blog and some pictures, very static, not much interaction. Then Web 2.0 came along that brought us Google, Facebook, all these websites we know now, where essentially these websites collect our data. You like certain things or you view certain things, and it's able to interact with this data and push it back towards you in a specific way. And now here we are, Web 3.0, and cryptocurrency allows for, Web 2.0 was programming data. Now you're able to program money and program assets, whether it's in the form of currency, in the form of art, in the form of many different things. So that's pretty much why it's being discussed today, because besides, like you said, you might think it's like a financial motivation behind to it, but it's more like a new
Utility,
level of the
right?
internet, a new capability. Yeah, exactly. A new utility that the internet is becoming to bring. And the whole world is deeply immersed into the internet now. So
I
that's
love it.
pretty much
I love it.
why we're here today discussing it. It's everywhere. You're starting to see it everywhere. To me personally, it's a little surreal because I got into this space, 2016, not too long ago, but within like the crypto space, to me, crypto moves so fast that to me it sounds like many, many years ago. And when I first got into it, people didn't really talk about it. It was something
Right.
that it was almost,
Like taboo.
you
Your
couldn't
bank
talk
could
about it.
actually shut you
Yeah,
down, right?
yeah, exactly. It was very, very taboo. Like you can, I'd be very hesitant to speak on it just because people might not take me seriously. You know, let's say in like the financial field, if I spoke about it, people might not take me seriously. Oh, this guy, he's a joke. These things are weird, scam. People use it, to do all types of bad things, and it was definitely taboo. So, to dive deep, into how this started, in 2008, you know, it's all started with Bitcoin. Just to be clear for everybody, Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and it's also the the safest. It's actually the safest, and we'll speak to as to why that is. But it started in 2008, where something called a white paper was released, and it was sort of a PDF, a digital
Hmm.
document citing exactly how a currency can properly function on the internet,
Hmm.
through using cryptography. And this was published by somebody who went by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, that person is completely anonymous. No one knows of the person. They went, they used to speak on a forum with other developers about this. And nobody knows if it was a person or a group of people. They just knew that that was the alias that was used online. And
Hmm.
the last we ever heard of this alias online was in 2011, actually. They left a famous last message saying, I'm moving on to other things now.
That's
And
crazy. That's crazy. So first of all, when people hear that, when I first heard that, I thought, is this like sci-fi? Like, it almost sounds like, why would someone who creates Bitcoin, which today is very, very valuable, in the beginning it wasn't, why would they choose to be anonymous? Why would they not like claim fame or wealth? But we won't get into that today because
mhm,
motivations, I mean, we don't know who it is. But first of all, let's say right out of the gate that this is not an investment podcast. We're not giving any legal or financial advice. And so we're just going to say that right out of the gate that, don't take this and say, oh, now I'm going to invest in XYZ. We're going to talk about different coins. We're going to talk about blockchain and NFTs. But really, there's plenty of podcasts out there that talk about investments. We're kind of going at it from a utility standpoint, which says, how is this going to reshape life? And especially in my world and the people I work with, IP, intellectual property, and books, because books are IP, and this is radically affecting every industry. In fact, Eric, this week I'm speaking to the real estate industry on
oh
blockchain,
wow.
uh, just because people heard, hey, Kary knows a little bit about this, and now we got to talk about real estate. So it's affecting everything. I mean, even down to like blockchain knows what food you're eating and where. and we'll talk about that sometime. But Eric, keep taking us deep into this. And first of all, why in the world, and I mean that like literally, in 2008, like let's go back to what was happening in 2008.
Hmm.
And some people say, it was created because of the housing market. I don't think that that's why, but it
Hmm.
certainly fits the narrative. So what was happening in the world, and why do you think we're so about decentralization, which is the basis of blockchain and Bitcoin?
Kary?
Gotcha. I'm here, man. Keep talking. You're
Okay,
good. You're
sorry.
good.
No, it just broke up for a second. So yeah, in 2008 there was the housing market crash that pretty much brought down, the rest of the market with it. There was, a lot of over leveraging being used in the banking system,
Mm,
and this was being worked on, thought about for many years.
mhm.
There's talks about this even in the late 90s, talk about this,
Yes.
but I think it was just developed, and I think 2008 was sort of seen like it was a good time for this idea to be, pushed forward by that individual. You asked earlier why might that be, anonymous to do such a thing, and is my opinion on that would be is they understood that this was a very disruptive technology,
Mm,
and they were disrupting something specifically, which is, money. They were disrupting money and that's something very delicate. You know, that the monetary system is controlled by governments, things like that. And it's something very delicate. So I could see why they would want to remain anonymous. And so yeah, that happened in 2008, and in 2009 was when the software was released and went live. And
wow.
essentially, it was a very it's very basic. Like Bitcoin to this day still has very basic functionality, and essentially the only task is to track transactions. So essentially,
Mm,
you can have a currency on there, and it can track transactions between me and you. And the way it work, it's an incentivized system, so that people around the world verify these transactions. Blockchain is essentially, think about it as a ledger, a big book, never-ending book where the transactions are all recorded. And through computing power, essentially, you can go through this ledger up from its beginning up until most recent, and you can track like, okay, Kary indeed does own 2 Bitcoin, so he indeed can transfer one over to Eric.
mm,
And it's verified through an incentivized mechanism, and that's essentially its main functionality, to store this currency on the chain, and then to track those transactions. Besides, transacting, very simple, functionality. This is a non-Turing complete uh, chain. Non-Turing complete means that it does not have full programming functionality. So as I mentioned,
say that again. A non what?
non-Turing complete.
And
So
and how do you spell that?
Turing, Turing. So a Turing complete, programming language would allow you to basically program any functionality.
Gotcha.
Non-Turing complete indicates that it's limited in its functionality, hence why you can only transact in Bitcoin. Now, some people may see that as a drawback, but that essentially was what the white paper pushed forward. That was the main functionality from its original standing point as to what it was going to do. And
Yeah.
that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But as we've gone forward, I'm sure many of you have heard many different things of cryptocurrency like NFTs, DeFi, the metaverse now, and all of that can't be facilitated on such a blockchain where you can only transact. So, going forward after that, somebody by the name of Vitalik Buterin, along with others, proposed, adding full functionality to the Bitcoin blockchain. And these original developers on the Bitcoin blockchain decided that, the idea was good, but for many different reasons, they weren't going to move forward with that. One of them might have been that they figured that people wouldn't actually want to use those different functionalities. They
Mhm.
wouldn't want to create, it was proposed with the intentions of decentralized finance, DeFi. We'll speak more about that. But they said that DeFi specifically wouldn't be used by users, and
Mm.
thought that having this full functionality would actually spam the network with, pointless things that actually turned out to, have a lot of uses now, and they denied it. So then going forward, Ethereum was developed,
Ethereum,
and
which is another cryptocurrency, but it's not merely tied to value, it's also tied to smart contracts.
yes, it has. Ethereum was the first Turing complete chain, which allowed for, full functionality. And that's kind of, where I think things really changed the trajectory of where this technology was going.
Mhm.
Bitcoin is still very prominent today. It has, there's people see it in different ways. Some people see it as a store of value because it's a currency that is completely decentralized, as in there is no centralized power controlling how many bitcoins are released. It has a finite amount. I believe it's 21 million, and so people see value in that.
And let's
Ethereum,
talk
on the
about
other
that.
hand,
Let's talk about
mhm,
that before we get into Ethereum, because I want people to realize that Bitcoin has certain components to it that make it superior to the US dollar or other types of what we call fiat currency. So, in other words, fiat currency, which is our dollar or other types of federally, linked income, they can merely create more. So, if the U.S. government, we gotta blow up some stereotypes for a moment, because one stereotype is, well, gee, Eric, my dollar has gold behind it, and that's kind of what we grew up thinking, that every dollar is backed by gold.
it
It
was at the time.
was until a certain year, many, many, many decades ago, and once it was pulled away from the gold standard, now the federal government can create more money, but it's not tied to any type of value. And so therefore we experience inflation. And
Hmm.
I think we all feel these effects, but very few people know these effects. But you're telling me that Bitcoin and other types of cryptocurrency have scarcity,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
scarcity creates value. Can you tell us a little bit about that, before we talk about,
Yes.
yeah, Ethereum? Yeah.
Okay. Well, first I want to say, it is subjective. People can have their opinions whether, Bitcoin is superior to the dollar. I still believe the dollar has functionality, and
Mhm,
I personally do not believe the dollar will cease to exist.
mhm,
Just because, it's the way, the monetary system has been set up, and we need that. That's a medium that we use to trade on a daily basis. Um, the way people are seeing Bitcoin now, so some people, they want to hedge, this inflation, because inflation has been a thing, for a long time. So some people want to hedge those things by, let's say, owning gold. Gold is deemed valuable and deemed to maintain and hold its value. So the way you would see Bitcoin is sort of digital gold,
mhm.
because it has a finite amount of 21 million. And as more people become aware of the space, people look for these hedges for inflation. As you see now, inflation has picked up. So a lot of even companies now are shifting heavily into Bitcoin. There's a lot of companies, they have a lot of money on their balance sheets that they're just holding on to, and they're kind of losing money at the moment by just holding dollars. So any off currency that they don't necessarily need immediately, they're willing to offload now into Bitcoin, just because of that you know that idea that it's a finite resource,
Mhm.
and the value is deemed just into that.
Which is
And
why Bitcoin started out as essentially 0 and moved to a few cents and then a dollar, and the joke was that, early users of Bitcoin would use a few Bitcoins to buy a pizza. And all of a sudden, as adoption becomes more mainstream and people start seeing the power of Bitcoin, all of a sudden now Bitcoin is $100 and $500 and 1,000. And I mean, we'll date ourselves by naming what it is today, but it's gone up as high as $60,000 and more for Bitcoin. But let's talk about a few quick things. We don't have to buy a literal Bitcoin. There's some people saying today, oh my gosh, I got to have $60,000 to buy one Bitcoin. Can you buy fractions of Bitcoin?
Yes, it could be fractionalized. I could theoretically we can buy $1 worth of Bitcoin. If there's an exchange that allows you to buy $1 worth, you can buy $1 worth now. You can buy $5 worth, $10 worth. You can fractionalize it,
Okay,
and it's kind of you know goes to show like it's digital.
there you go.
When you're using sort of a calculator, you can use decimals. It's not like with cash. With cash, I give you a $5 bill. It is what it is. You could break up a $5 bill into dollars and then into pennies and things like that and go further into it. With Bitcoin, since it's digital, I can buy 0.0032 Bitcoin,
Yeah.
for example, something like that.
Okay, great. So again, people might be saying today with the first podcast that we're doing, oh, they're just talking about Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is one, am I saying this correct? It's one technology that runs on blockchain, but there are many other types of technology, i.e. crypto and other contracts that can and will run on blockchain. Like you said, it's the new internet. And so if we were thinking back in the 90s, what do you do with the internet? You might have thought you create a brochure that talks about your business. Now you look at the internet and you're like, oh my gosh, you can order a car to show up and pick you up, and you can, book a vacation. I mean, the internet today, we rack our brains and we're like, oh my gosh, look at what we've been able to do with it. You didn't see that back in the early 90s. And today, blockchain, Eric, tell us, let's fast forward and let's just dream a little bit, because I want people to see like, oh my gosh, people are getting married on the blockchain. People,
Yeah.
people can have self-executing contracts that don't involve lawyers, but once certain thresholds are met, all of a sudden this contract literally is self-executing. I mean, I want people to realize like this is going to change everything. And yes,
Yeah.
blockchain is just one tiny example. So can you give us a little bit? Now let's talk about Ethereum maybe, and why contracts and how all this is going to just change the world.
Okay. Well, uh, just to say first, this, like I said before, this adds full functionality, programmability to the blockchain. That's what Ethereum brought to the table. And it does this through smart contracts. Now, smart contracts are essentially pieces of code that have the ability to hold and execute on assets. So you can program a smart contract, you know, to hold your assets and then do something with these assets upon a condition that is met. So
Okay.
whatever.
And that sounds amazing. And that sounds theoretical, but I want people to realize, okay, I just went to a restaurant with my family today. They gave me food. At the end of our meal, I handed them a piece of plastic and it paid for our whole meal. In other words, that was a micro contract that it's understood.
Yes.
They give me food and I give them value back. That's a contract. So every industry, every customer, everything you do, even a stamp, even a book, even when I go order a pair of glasses, they give me an exam, and then everything is a contract. Is this true? All consumer. I mean, back to the very beginning where you give me an apple and I give you, a tree, whatever.
Hmm.
That was an exchange. That was a contract. So literally contracts are, I don't want people to think like, oh, that's just for lawyers. Everything we do in life is a contractual relationship. Is this true?
Yes, yes, essentially. And, then the title, smart contract, for people to understand it, a little more simply, I say, okay, we had phones and now we have smartphones. That's
Mm,
the way. This is smart contracts now. And you could see the functionalities that smartphones have brought to the table. Somebody could be viewing us right now on their phone. And that's a big change from, traditional phones where you could just call, things like that. So that's the way I kind of, explain it to people that want to understand the impact it can have,
yes,
because it
I like
has
that.
that it's a big impact from regular phones where you dial a number and we can just talk, to smartphones, and now which is some smartphones are more powerful than the laptop I'm talking to you on right now.
That's
So
fantastic. I love it. I love it. So let's dive in. We have about 5 more minutes because we're going to make these 30-minute episodes, and we're just getting started, folks. And so we might literally stop and press record and go on to episode 2. But I'll tell you why, Eric. I wanted to invite. I call it the Igniting Souls Tribe, but
mhm.
certainly there's going to be so many more people who join the tribe, join this conversation. Why did I, first of all, why did I want to talk about this? Because I like the future. I'm a futurist. I love to see where things are going, but I also care about people. And I think that in this space, Eric, there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of people who are, I mean, we're even seeing Matt Damon on football games with a crypto commercial. I mean, it's hitting mainstream. I want people to realize, like, when I went and took my kids to ice cream in Michigan this summer, I mean, think about this, Michigan, not a city. I'm talking about like kind of backcountry Michigan. And I go buy my kids ice cream and it says now accepting, and it listed several types of cryptocurrency. I think I texted you the picture because the moment I saw
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
I'm like, wow, the world has just changed. This is going to go so mainstream. It's going to affect everyone. So, Eric, as we wrap up the first episode, that I think we're going to call this thing blockchain life, and who knows? First of all, it's an experiment, but tell us, give us 3 minutes on the why. Why
Mhm.
why NFTs? Why crypto? Why blockchain? Why is this important?
Okay, well, this sort of gives the user more power. So what really struck me about this, from besides besides a user standpoint, let's break this down. There are kids out there, 14, 15, 16-year-old, maybe even younger,
Yeah.
that know how to use computers. They really know how to use computers. And you know, before this kind of technology, I myself couldn't go out there and establish these very complex, financial contracts. I could not
Mm,
do that. If I wanted to do something like that, I have to go to a bank. A bank could do that, and I couldn't do something like that. But now this technology gives anybody, anywhere, the opportunity to program such a contract and put that out there and allow for users to interact with it.
that's
So
so good.
I know of kids 13, 14 years old that were able to now do functions that before, many years ago, you'd only be able to do if, let's say, you were 30 years, 40 years
Yeah.
old, and a top company that allow you to have that power to interact in such a way with other people and create these kind of sort of contracts with other people.
You
So
nailed
this
it. You nailed it. It took the 13-year-old and put them on the same level as Chase Bank.
essentially,
I
yes,
mean I
yes,
mean, in some ways, like, as Wall Street. Like, in other words, the same way YouTube allowed Justin Bieber to just, like, totally come into the music space and, podcast to overtake TV. What we really see now is this, you nailed it, a decentralization where the gatekeepers are no longer the people that are in these ivory towers. All people have truly now been allowed to tap into currency which is the way that life operates. Is that
And
what you're saying?
yeah, and it's not just, I gave that example because I said I've been, I'm very passionate about just the financial side of things from a banking standpoint. I studied finance in college, but it's just about anything. NFTs can be art now. People have been doing with art, and it's the same thing. There's people that, were struggling artists that now are very, very famous in the space, have done very well because it allows them to put their art out there and then have things such as like royalties on their art. And
Yeah.
before, you know, I'm not an artist, but let's say I were to paint something and you, Kary, deemed it to be, oh, that's a nice painting, Eric. Kary bought it, and now Kary's best friend says, Kary, I love that painting on your wall. Can I buy it from you? I sold it to Kary for, you know, friends discount, gave it to Kary for $10. Kary sends it to his other friend. He says, you know what? I'm willing to let it go for $100. Kary now pockets the $90 difference. I'm happy for Kary, but me as the artist,
You missed
I
out.
have no part. I have no part in the $90. Now, since this is programmable, I can, through code, I can set it up so that, okay, if there's an exchange of my art, I get, let's say, 5% of whatever the value of the exchange took place. And
Forever.
forever, yes. So is that how many times that art switches hands, things like that, I get to hold on to it. My royalty. And that's
Yes.
just, you know,
That's
it
one
empower
example.
that's one example. There are so many examples, Kary, of things like how this empowers, creators and people and things like that that we don't even know of yet. Because just
Yes.
like how you said in the '90s, when the internet came to be, if you were to tell somebody that I'm gonna use my phone to order a car and they're gonna come pick me up, things
Or
like
see
that.
a
Somebody,
doctor, or see it, a doctor's gonna do telehealth, and you don't even have to go visit the doctor's office. People would be like, "What are you talking about?"
yeah, they would say you're crazy, write you off, all these things. So,
I
you
love it, I
know,
love it.
one
Eric.
thing I would
Oh,
like
yeah.
to leave the viewers today is that some people might say, that might not happen, or that's dumb, things
Mhm.
like that won't be able to happen. And what I'd say to that is, I think it's very important for people to maintain a young mind. When
Mm,
you're young and you're in school, you're willing to listen to what the teacher has to say. You never question the teacher. You're there, you're being curious, and
oh,
you're
yeah.
learning new things, and you're curious about everything. And I'm willing, that's what I want to leave to the viewers today. You want to maintain a young mind, a mind that's able to, be curious and learn about other things. You might not agree with everything, but at least, be willing to listen and be
Mhm.
willing to, think, okay, now why might these make sense?
Yeah,
Some people might come to you with an idea and you shut it down. Instead of shutting it down, okay, try to see from their perspective. Okay, why might this idea work? And I think you'll start to see that you start to understand things, and it's just a good way to look at things in life.
I love it. People mocked the automobile, people mocked the airplane. I mean, you just go through history and you say, there are people who said that, no one will ever need a computer. And
Hmm.
and we kinda take those quotes and we freeze them in time and say, "That person's so ignorant," and yet they knew their reality of the day, but they couldn't see the reality of tomorrow, and that's what this podcast is about, and yes, it'll affect authors and coaches and entrepreneurs and speakers. That's kind of our target audience is ACEs, authors, coaches, entrepreneurs, and speakers, but really all industries. So Eric,
Hmm.
you were a fantastic guest. I'm gonna stop the recording and if you're cool with
Okay.
it, let's hop right back on and do episode 2 because we're gonna talk about some crazy things, even
Yes.
Chipotle and how the food supply chain can be improved. Oh my gosh. We'll talk soon, Eric. Thanks for being here today.
Okay. Thank you for